Thinking about the new programme, the government has just published its response to the Heseltine report, which includes some detailed information about how European funds are likely to be used and coordinated more in the future. Could you summarise what the main points are and what the differences are likely to be from the current programme?
Yes, the key difference is that we'll have locally designed programmes within a broad national policy framework, rather than something that's felt, particularly for ESF, much more top-down in the current programme. We'll be publishing initial guidance to local enterprise partnerships very soon, which will set out the issues we want them to consider, the people we want them to work with, the policy priorities we need them to focus on, and ask them to start developing their strategic plans for their area. We'll then be listening to feedback on that initial guidance and then producing more detail later in the summer, which we hope will really help them develop something that means something to their local area. And the other issue we're exploring is how best we can support voluntary sector organisations to engage more with the programme. So that's been, they've struggled at times, particularly more recently in ESF, to engage as they have done in the past. And we are looking at ways to make it easier for them to get involved, particularly where they are likely to be to have real expertise to bring to bear, for example, on the part of the ESF that will be ring-fenced for tackling social exclusion and for combating poverty.
Skills Funding Agency has just had an ESF procurement round, and that's the first example of working with LEPs, the sort of model that's included in the new programme that you were just talking about. How's that process gone? What has that told us about the capacity of LEPs to actually do this strategic job of identifying priorities?
I think it's been a mixed picture. I also think that to some extent we set it up deliberately as a learning process. We were keen to find ways to deliver through a national organisation to local specifications, but we were clearly working with a less than ideal overall timetable. This was a procurement that was already planned and had to meet certain deadlines. So some of the feedback from local areas has been fantastic. Thank you for asking, and really pleased. We expected you just to ignore what we said and to produce something completely different, but actually we see precisely what we asked for reflected in the specs, so that's been very positive. Others have said, actually, as a consultation, it didn't really work for us. We only had time to speak to kind of half a dozen people in the pub, and that's not really ideal. Now, I don't know which of those ends of the spectrum was the more common experience, but clearly the first thing it highlights is the need to give local enterprise partnerships enough time to do the proper consideration. I think on the skills for the workforce stuff that the Skills Funding Agency were procuring in that way, it's more likely that you'd expect an employer-led body to have clear views about what might be needed in their area. On some of the other areas of ESF, the employment support and the social inclusion, perhaps it is less familiar territory. So again, there's support they'll need from other local partners, but also clear guidance from us about what's required. So my own view, and maybe I would say this, wouldn't I, is that I think we can take encouragement about the positive experiences, but not to be too disheartened about any negative experiences people have had, because I think they don't need to be, that particular timetables and approaches don't need to be hardwired into the new approach, and we can genuinely learn from it and learn how to better engage and how to get a better conversation with LEPs about what their needs are.
So when you talk about LEPs having a strategic role in the process, am I right in thinking that the likelihood is actual delivery on the ground will still be managed through the CFO type process as it is at present?
Yes, that's right. They'll definitely set the overall strategy. They'll be then involved in kind of ongoing monitoring, making sure that what's happening is still meeting those strategies, adjusting the strategy as necessary, depending on kind of the economic circumstances and so on. But they're not delivery bodies themselves, so others will need to be the delivery agents. And there's potentially a range of different ways where projects could come into being. I'm personally keen to find ways to combine the strengths of our current ESF model, which include, I think, strong performance management and procurement expertise with the more local decision making that we need to see in the next programme. So, for example, building on the experience of the Skills Funding Agency more recently, you could see a model where the individual skills needs are defined at local level, overseen by the LEP, but we use the Skills Funding Agency as the means to bring that provision into being and then to manage it. Equally, there might be areas where a more project-based approach is more appropriate, where you'd expect to see some kind of open call and projects coming forward with proposals. So I think we might see a mixed economy of different approaches to delivery in the future.
One of the other key elements is the greater coordination between ESF and ERDF and other European funds as well. How do you see that working in practice?
I think there are a number of different elements to it. So as a starting point, one of the real values is that the new approach will deliver genuine strategic alignment. So we're asking the same body with a local set of responsibilities to come up with a plan for ESF, ERDF and part of the Rural Fund to deliver what their area needs. So you should get a plan for each of those three funds which reflects the same kind of overall local priorities. So you should therefore get better alignment at that level. The second area is that one of the advantages of the process we've been through actually in the policy development is that we've established much more strong links between the different managing authorities, and that needs to continue into the future. So we need to act as a kind of single government team in some sense to support the delivery of those local plans, so we can give good advice about, well, actually, if that's what you want to achieve, probably the best way of doing it is X, Y, Z with this combination of funds. And the third thing is that there is certainly the potential for individual projects, programmes to be supported by more than one fund. So I'm genuinely unsure of whether there will be individual examples of where individual projects need funding from both. It may be more of a case of just being clearer at the margins of, well, yes, you could fund this on either, what's the best, which is the best vehicle. But equally, we're completely open to the possibility there'll be projects which will need funding from both of those funds, maybe also from the Rural Fund too. So we wait and see what we'll get back in terms of the proposals from LEPS.